it's been great to be able to learn a lot about how people work, how their creative mind works. It's great to be able to learn about humanity that way.
This podcast encourages and empowers you to create your own unique real story, develop your own unique real statement, and discover your own unique real self. The power is yours. Good morning, MarQ Piocos. Previously, episode 1946 of the 12-Minute Convos podcast. It's been just 2 years, 1 month, 10 days, 12 hours since we last recorded that conversation. That was then, this is now. Mark, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good.
It's such a grand opportunity to reconnect with you. What's up? What's going on in the podcasting world? The last time we spoke, there were a ton of things you were doing up in the Nevada area, right? So how have things evolved?
Well, I mean, I actually made Nevada more my home, my permanent base now. So things have been kind of crazy with the podcast, considering I've been doing a lot more live remotes. I've been able to do more live interviews, locally, which has been nice, and been able to kind of experience a little bit more of the flavor of Las Vegas. So it's been pretty nice to be able to meet so many great people out here in the Vegas area.
I'm so sorry that we didn't connect. There was a communication challenge in between Butte and Nevada and where you were and where I was, right?
Yeah, exactly. I was in Helena at the time that you were kind of going through your trip, and I was hoping to connect with you in Helena because Helena had some really great, interesting people. But now I'm permanently in Las Vegas, so the next time you head this direction, I will be in Vegas, so we'll have to definitely catch up.
Oh my, the heat of Vegas is not natural.
Well, it's pretty nice right now. It's right now in the 50s, I think, 50s,
Sweet.
60s. So we're in like the cooler part of the year.
So, I mean, like moving from Helena to Nevada, how is that? Because with Americans, right, it's such of a grand land expanse as opposed to in the Caribbean. I get to the other side of my island in what, like an hour time, right? 2 hours max. How does that transition with you?
I mean, it's a 13-hour. I mean, it's a 20-hour drive basically from Helena to Las Vegas. So it is quite a stretch. Obviously the climate's a lot different from where Helena is. Helena, I mean, during the winter is, we're having a couple feet worth of snow and below freezing temperatures around this time. And down here in Las Vegas, where, obviously we don't have as much precipitation, but we do have, like I said, cooler weather right in this, right in the 50s during the day and maybe the 40s during the night. So the climate itself is a lot different. I think it's, what drives a lot of people to move further down south as well. And, really, to tell you the truth, just the environment itself is different because, one of the real reasons what drew me to Vegas is the fact that they can do so much stuff down here. I mean, you can, on any given week, you can go and see a concert. You can go see some fights. You can see. You can have some of the great cuisine that's down here. You don't get that as much up in Montana, and it was a kind of a choice in my head that I wanted to move down here. It's where my podcast is based out of.
Yeah, somewhere in Vegas, right? Somewhere
Yeah,
in
exactly.
Vegas. It's amazing, right? Like how one thing led to the next, right? I mean, come on, the podcast is somewhere in Vegas, and here it is now from Helena to somewhere.
Well, I mean, it started down here, and then circumstances changed, and then I was commuting between Vegas and Helena, and then finally it just wound up. I got to a point where I can be able to be down here permanently, which is nice. So. I mean, it's a great thing. I mean, it's, this town is such a unique individual in terms of the United States, just because all the characters and all the people that have come here.
Yeah.
And it's nice to be able to see, kind of this city evolve. I mean, we're getting the big Raider Stadium coming in this year. So it's going to be crazy the next year that we're going to have so much going on and so much expansion.
You're archiving this, right? I mean, we're up to 891 episodes on your podcast, right? It's been, what, like 11 years now you've been podcasting? Is that accurate?
I think, yeah, yes. I think we just celebrated our 11th in October, I believe. And, yeah, it's crazy to think that, very few podcasts ever make it that long. I mean, I think I started right before Adam Carolla started his podcast, and he's on what, year 10 or year 11 or whatever. So yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think about that, and I had to go back. I changed platforms because the my old platform decided was being bought by this newer platform, and I was offered the opportunity to switch over. And just looking back past some of the people that we've had in the past on that, it's just amazing. And I mean, last year was a little bit, as much great as a lot of the guests that I have and all the publicists that I work with made last year a great year. I mean, the only bad news last year was the fact that we've lost five people that have been on the show, and it's a kind of, it kind of is kind of sad to see that happen. I mean, on top of the list is Eddie Money, and he was always a great guest for me. I've had him on 3 or 4 times on the show, and he really helped build the show and get some publicity out there. I mean, one of the times he was on my show wound up making news on the New York Post, and it was just absolutely amazing to have that kind of publicity for the podcast. So yeah, it was almost bittersweet to see some of these guests that have been on my show pass on, but it just goes to show you how long this podcast has been on, and how many people we've reached. So it's been crazy.
We've had some guests that passed as well, and yeah, I feel your pain. It's really bittersweet because we've gotten the opportunity to archive the voices of our guests, but at the same time, to know that that's it, right? Like, that's that voice there, and they're no longer here. Today, however, is your birthday, and you're doing the thing, right, that you've been doing for what's over a decade now. How does it make you feel, though, when you look back from now to then to see that voice that said you should start that podcast, that voice that you listened to? How does it make you feel that you've done what you desired?
It was a friend of mine named Sean Daly that ended up getting me into this. He got me into the original platform and said, "Hey, you need to start a podcast." Sorry to say that he's passed about, what, 5, 6 years ago. But I mean, to be able to, like I said, be able to experience all the things that I have, to be able to talk to all the people that I've talked to. I mean, I've learned so much from them. I was on another podcast and they asked me about that and my drive, and the big thing was curiosity. I'm a very curious person, and I really want to know a little bit more about humanity, and it's nice to have that kind of slice of life. I mean, on my podcast, it's just not about entertainers really too. Sometimes I do have other people from the business end of things, or the self-help kind of end of things and all that as well. And it's been great to be able to learn a lot about how people work, how their creative mind works. Be able to see what they do and what their mindset is. It's great to be able to be able to learn about humanity that way. And I mean, I've learned a lot about, you know, I learned a lot about different people's crafts, how they think, what they do when something's not going right, and it's great to be able to have that, have that in the back of my mind and be educated and all that as well. So, it's great to be able to do that as well. And like I said, I work with some really great publicists. I mean, the show right now kind of almost books itself. They've always brought me interesting guests. So, it's going to be interesting coming up this year. Like I said, we're doing a lot more on-site interviews, a lot more remotes, and I'm hoping really to start expanding the podcast a little bit more now that I have that opportunity.
There's MMA news and there's the filmmaking documentary that's going on in the midst of everything. How are things going with that?
I'm going to be out at Bellator actually this weekend, covering the big fight between Chris Cyborg and Julia Budd, which is really, really nice. I've always had a really great relationship with Bellator, and
Sweet.
I'll be covering a couple more Invicta events coming up this year as well. I'm probably not going to be doing any big major film stuff for at least another year or so. I'm going to try to get the couple of my documentaries kind of shored up a little bit so I can start distributing those out a little bit. But right now, kind of on the filmmaking end, we're kind of slowing it down a little bit just so I can kind of settle down into a nice little rhythm and make sure everything kind of goes smoothly. But in terms of the MMA realm, it's great to be here in Vegas again, just because I have access to so many fighters and have the ability to cover a lot of local events as well. So I can and I can talk to fighters in person. So it's great to be able to have that opportunity as well. So I expect that Wombat Sports will be expanding pretty much throughout the rest of the year.
It's been an amazing opportunity to call in and to hear, most of all on your birthday. I am honored for that as well. But to hear that you've not given up on the thing that you set out, my friend, it is both motivational and inspirational as a podcaster to know that, hey, there is hope when you do not give up. When you do not give up, you said in our last conversation, follow your heart's desire. And it seems to me that you've been doing that, Mark. So again, a pleasure I treasure. Before we leave, is there anything else you'd like to share with our amazing audience?
Just keep continuing to tune in to Somewhere in Vegas. And like I said, we changed platforms over to Spreaker.com, but you guys can go ahead and check that out on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And, it'll be an interesting year to say the least. Like I said, I'll have so many opportunities to interview so many interesting people that you may have seen, on television or in the movies that you don't realize, who it is or whatever. But I've had those opportunities, and it's great to be able to do that. So make sure you guys check that out. And if you're in the mixed martial arts realm and want to really, take a look and see what's going on, definitely go and check out my website, wombatsports.com, and you guys can check out some really cool MMA interviews from some of the best female fighters out there. And, follow me on Twitter at WMA News for my for MMA, and at SWIV for my podcast. And then you guys can check us out on Instagram now too. I'm at SWIV Podcast, and you can see some of the stuff that we're out on, and see some of the people that I get to meet on location as well. So definitely check that out, and of course Somewhere in Vegas on Facebook as well. So continue to listen, and thank you for the support.
You're welcome. Again, Mark Piocos, folks. Thank you for being on What is Inspired by 12-Minute Convos with Angel Jones. This podcast is produced by Pod Edits. Visit podedits.com for professional podcast publishing.